Welcome, Todd, to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
I'm looking so forward to having you on the podcast and hearing your story, going through, some of the information that I received as a result of your submission for the podcast. I was like, I cannot wait for Tuesday. It's going to be a great day. So tell me a little bit about you, where you're from, and really what brings you here on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me, and what a great open-ended question to start with. Well, I am currently living in Portugal, but it was a long and winding road that brought me there. Um, I have lived all over the United States. I studied a couple of different institutions, a couple of different degrees in different places. Um, and most recently, I was in Denver, Colorado, but we lost our home in a wildfire, and in the wake of the wildfire, we sat down as a family and said, do we want to go back to what was and try to rebuild, or is this an opportunity for us to go on an adventure? And the whole family was behind the idea, and that's how we started looking around the world for where we wanted to be, where it would take us, and Portugal had lots and lots to offer. So I'm running my
What a
business here from
powerful
Portugal. I have
question.
clients all over the world, but that's where I am reaching you from today.
Fantastic. What a
And
powerful question, Todd. In the wake of something really quite awful, losing a home to a wildfire, to say to yourself, hmm, now should we take this opportunity and run with it? Most people wouldn't say that. They just kind of go into
uh,
go mode. So, that speaks to your character already.
we certainly know lots of folks. There was 1,000 homes that were lost that day, and we have friends and neighbors who immediately switched into the mindset of, I have to get back what was lost. But I've lived enough life before the fire to know that that's a bit of an illusion. There is really no going back to what was. So my wife is of the same mindset, and so we said, hey, with no possessions, it's easy to move anywhere you want to. So that
True
was
enough.
yeah, it was sort of a well, my brother said it best, and we chuckle at my wife and I chuckle when we talk about this, but he said, I've never seen anyone fall upward before. And really that's what happened to us. We've had a number of things that have been difficult in our lives, the fire of which may be, the largest, certainly the most recent, but we always try to ask that question, how do we take this and find what's new, what's good, what's the opportunity in this? And
Yeah.
it's not easy. It's not without challenges, but it definitely has led to some very interesting chapters of my life.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Okay. Well, and I'm probably derailed you a little bit, but I thought that was so spectacular. So, okay, so you've decided to move to Portugal. You had this awful wildfire. Tell us a little bit more about you.
Well, so I was an ordained Lutheran minister for 20 years, and that actually it depends on what rabbits we want to chase today. That was born of a religious experience. I wasn't raised in any religious tradition, but at the end of 20 years of ministry, I sort of felt like I had ridden that train to the end of the line, and there really wasn't more for me in that setting, in that role. But there was a lot of wonderful things that I had gained in my time, and I wanted to continue to do and those do and be those things. So that's when I kind of took the best of that work and started my own business. So I am an emotional intelligence coach, which I actually focus on couples and helping couples to reconnect. What I've discovered is that when each partner is committed to personal growth and to becoming more self-aware and better at managing themselves and managing their relationships, better at empathy. Lo and behold, our relationships improve. So it's a little non-traditional way of bringing people together. It's not couples counseling. Let's do communication work. Let's do exercises. It's really, how do we understand ourselves? How do we understand our partner in better ways so that we can have better interactions and a better relationship? And that was something that I learned over all of those years of working with couples, working with individuals, and the institution of the church. So that was the part of the freedom to move anywhere in the world, was that I had my own business, and I was able to conduct it from, from in front of any computer, really.
Oh, that's fantastic. Now, Todd, I really want to draw a parallel here. So for myself, my husband and I, we've been through couples counseling, a couple of times, and
Sure.
we've had both. We've had the communication coach that kind of gives you the, or rather the counselor that gives you the techniques and those sorts of things. And then recently we had a new counselor, and he's fantastic, and he's very much, let's learn about your emotional intelligence. Let's teach you how to be more emotionally intelligent separately, and you'll find that naturally your relationship improves. And
Yeah.
that is precisely what happened. And
Yeah.
so, I really want to commend you on your work because, and especially from a man's perspective, I really, really think that there can be so much deep healing in a relationship from both sides.
For
Um,
sure.
because previously counselors that we've seen that are communication coaches are women, and they tend to take the woman's side a bit, or in my situation, it was that way. And so it didn't always feel balanced. And so we
Yeah.
had we had a difficult time. And
Yeah,
so,
I make an effort when I'm working with couples to make a personal connection with each of them. I find that more often than not, it is the woman who seeks out the help, seeks out the assistance, and very frequently there's a resistance on the man's part. This is something she wants, or that, like you say, I'm going to take her side. So part of my own journey has been that I was really emotionally unintelligent. So I like to say, if you're failing math class, don't go to the kid who's acing it to tutor you, because he doesn't understand how he does the problems. Go to the kid who failed last year and is passing this year, because he's the one who can actually teach you the steps of solving the problems. And that was me when I was a young man, and I told my parents I wanted to be a minister. My father said, "You can't be a pastor. You're terrible with people." And like that was his gut reaction, just spilled out of his mouth when I said that. You can imagine, first of all, it was a terrible blow, but I came to realize that he was right. And I had a supervisor in my time of training who said, "Todd has none of the gifts and skills that are essential for ministry." And somehow I continued to press on. There's plenty in that story, but the net was sort of a rock tumbler. And after 10 or 12 years of ministry, I started to see all of my rough edges, and I had tools for growth. And it was that kid who had failed math class and was passing. That's when I discovered the Enneagram. I don't know if you know that Enneagram is it's a system of personality, but I like to say the emotional intelligence is the road that we're driving down. The car we're going to ride in is the Enneagram, because it gives us tools to understand ourselves, understand our partners, to understand how to handle ourselves, or how to interact with our partners in ways that are just profound and deeply effective.
I love how you said the which rabbit do we want to chase? There is so many questions I have about both. Well, let's begin in the past. So let me know a little bit about what got you into ministry, and maybe
Sure,
what got you out. Those
sure.
two questions.
Yeah, as I said, I was raised in a secular house. Dunkin' Donuts was our Sunday morning ritual. But I fell in love with a girl in college, and she wanted to go to church. And so I wanted to go to church because that's the way young men are. But while I was there, I had what really, can only be described as a religious experience. The world melted away. I felt infinitesimally small, and yet at the same time known and seen. And I didn't really understand it. Truth be told, 30 years later, I still don't really understand it. But afterward, my girlfriend said to me, "What happened to you in there?" I said, "I don't know, but I think I have to find out." And that really began the journey that ultimately led with me being in seminary, which I thought I was going to seminary to learn more about what had happened to me and learn more about a religion. Turns out seminary is a vocational school for training ministers, and that was the direction then that my life went. Interestingly, there is a board that oversees the permission to ordain, and that board said no to me. They said, "No, we don't think that you're fit for being a minister." And about 4 years passed where I served the church in various capacities before a congregation said to me, "We would like you to be our pastor." And I said, "I'm not allowed. I haven't been approved." And they went to bat for me and pulled strings behind the scenes. I got a letter in the mail one day from the bishop that said, "Hey, why don't you come and be ordained and be the minister?" And I was like, I didn't think I was allowed to be. So I've always been a little bit of an outsider in that way. And certainly the way that I was a minister for 20 years, I wasn't very culturally Christian or culturally Lutheran. I was sort of theologically those things. And that had a profound effect on the congregations that I served and served them in dynamic and transformative ways. But about 15, maybe 17 years in, I got an invitation to attend my oldest brother's retirement from the Air Force. He had served for 20 years. And I looked at that invitation. I thought, you're allowed to quit after 20 years? Somehow I thought I had to retire as a pastor. I didn't realize I was allowed out of this. Like it was a life-changing moment for me. And so I began to make a plan to exit. And a few years later I did. I was tired of the nights and weekends. I was tired of the politics and the infighting. And truth be told, that there is something called compassion fatigue. And I was really kind of at the end of what I had to give. But as I said before, I took the best of that, what I was good at, what I loved about that role, and then tried to craft a life for myself and my family in those ways.
Oh, fantastic. Did you have a particular interest in couples and counseling in that way as a minister? Had you already been working in that space?
I've always had an interest in personal growth, and as a pastor, I certainly did a fair bit of couples counseling. I also worked with individuals quite a bit, and when I realized that I could work with couples by working with the individuals. So when I work with couples, I have joint meetings. We meet the three of us, of course, but I also do individual meetings. And that was sort of an eye-opening moment for me because I'm not in the personal development realm. Um, I really want to see an abundance of love in the world. I love to see people reconnect in ways that, we fall in love with our spouses for a reason, and life gets long and in the way, and ruts happen, and people change. But I think that there's fundamentally still that foundational connection, and I love to see that. So it was sort of the best of all possibilities to reach out and hang my shingle as a couples coach um, and use the skills that I had and the insight from the Enneagram to help people. You know what, Christine, this is a little heavy maybe, but as a minister, I walked the end of life journey with countless individuals. And it's a little cliche, nobody says, "I wish I'd spent more time at the office." But it's true when you're actually sitting with these people and hearing their stories and being with them in their final moments, that 201, they say, the only thing that matters is love. The only thing that matters is the people that are in your life. And so that was really what I carried forward and said, I want that's the point I want to push. That's the point I want to touch. And because I know that it is the cosmic truth. It's the thing that ultimately all of us must face and hopefully be content with ourselves for the ways we've conducted, the love that we've created and passed along.
Mm, isn't that the truth? And I love how I kept hearing you say the best of, because it's so true. You found the best in your career. You're finding the best of life, and and you're helping people find the best in each other and in themselves. Most importantly,
Yeah,
really.
yeah.
Have you always focused on the best of, or was that a transitional moment for you as well?
No, that's a great question. No, I have not always focused that way. I don't know that I could pinpoint a moment, but I certainly, my wife will say to our children, you would not believe this is not the man that I married. You would not believe who your father was when we first met, because I really was a glass half empty person, and I perceived the world to be a scarce and dangerous place. And I've had the blessing of so many people helping out of the goodness of their heart. My wife and I lived in our car for a year, traveling around the United States and really just relying on the kindness of strangers and acquaintances. And that was sort of a time when I went, oh, maybe maybe people aren't evil. Maybe the world isn't awful, and that was the beginning of the shift. And over the decades that followed, um, I kind of leaned into that and discovered the truth of it. And then at some point it became central to the way that I think about myself and the world around me. And I try to do that too. I try to be generous and accommodating and helpful. And people say, "Oh, you don't need to do that." And I go, "I know I don't need to do that. I'm paying it forward. People have done this for me. I'll do it for you. You do it for somebody else." I think that blessings compound in that way.
No kidding. I'm curious, how did that affect you and your life? So really, that transition where you began to say, maybe the world isn't so scarce. When that began to happen for you, how did it affect the quality of your life?
Profoundly for the positive, one of the most challenging things I think probably any of us have to deal with is the humility of receiving, learning how to receive. And many of us, I think, resist the abundance of the world because it asks one thing of us only, that we be open and receptive. And that can be, quite humbling. It can be very challenging. But I think that, you asked about the quality of my life when I began to just say, hey, sometimes I'm going to win, sometimes I'm going to lose, sometimes the free things are going to fall into my lap, other times I'm going to pay more than I should have. But that all of it is trending in the right direction, and on balance in the end it will be for the best. um I relaxed. I live in less fear. And really, even when I'm challenged or difficult things face me now, my sort of first response is, okay, this is going to be tricky, this may be hard, it may not be fun, but in the end I think it will be something of value, so let's start with that attitude. And I think, expectation is so much a part of outcome. What we expect ultimately, well, I don't know if it was Henry Ford or Mary Kay, it's been attributed to a lot of people, but if you believe you can or you believe you can't, you're right. And
Right.
and I try to embrace that idea and believe that, we can, and it's going to be good.
I love that quote. I have it everywhere. And I attribute it to Henry Ford. So yeah, love that. Um, okay, so I'm curious, and it's okay if it's not a comfortable question, but I'm curious, what do you attribute as the abundant force? Is it God? Is it universe? Is it all of it? Like, how does it?
Oh, yeah. Boy, that is a hard one. It's not so much that I'm uncomfortable with it as I don't have a really great answer. In the world of the Enneagram, there are head people and heart people and body people. I happen to be a head person. So a lot of my first half of my life was devoted to solving and naming and categorizing and understanding and systematizing. But I find that this force we're discussing really is slippery and eludes so much of those. As soon as you've got it pegged down or cornered or named, it turns out it's something different and it works in different ways. So I think one of the big growth points for me along the journey was realizing that something can be true even if I don't understand it, and I can even trust in a thing or operate a thing even if I don't understand it. And I used to say to my parishioners, "Do you understand how engines work, or how computers work, or how airplanes work? But you get on the airplane anyhow, don't you?" And I think for me, this force that is creative and abundant and positive, it's difficult to know or name or understand, but that doesn't necessarily take away from the truth of it.
I love that. I remember watching a documentary that said just that. It said, you may not understand electricity, but yet you still enjoy the benefits of it. And it
Yeah,
truly is the same idea here. Um,
absolutely.
yeah, and and I really love how you're not pinning down a specific or dogmatic thing in this sense that you're saying, you know, this is the route and that's the way, and I think that that gives way for the people listening to go, I believe in this, I believe in this, I believe in this, and all
Sure.
of that can sit, all of that can be true, and it can all be personalized to the person.
I really kind of struggled a lot as I left the church with what is my faith statement? Like, who am I? What do I believe? And I have two tattoos. One I got as a very young man. It's a cross that I got after the religious experience. And lo, these many years later, I'm like, why do I have this cross on my body? I don't want this to be the symbol that I carry out to the world. But the other one I actually just got in the last 6 months with my middle child. And the faith statement that I finally decided on, it's in Latin here, but it just says, life is good. That's really ultimately what I know that I can rest my whole way of understanding and operating and morals and decision making and all of it. It's just, you know what? Life is good.
Life is good because it
Life
is.
is good.
Yeah, and and I've noticed that many times you've fallen upwards, that you've made a choice to make life good. That throughout these situations, throughout these twists and turns, people saying that you're not enough, your home burning down, you transitioning out of a very intense career into a new, very intense career. All of these things that are going on for you, I'm noticing that you have a very strong choice mechanism, and like you said, that really developed over time to
Hmm.
say, I'm going to choose that life is good because not
Hmm.
everybody does.
No, it's true. And I don't think that everything is in my control. I should say perhaps I've learned the lesson the hard way that not everything is in my control. But at the same time, there are things that are in my control, and my attitude is one of them. And I like to say we are dealt a hand, right? I mean, there's no question. We don't get to choose which cards from the deck we hold in our hand, but how we play them really is up to us. And when we claim a sense of ownership, when we recognize the agency we have, in fact, when I work with couples, a lot of times helping people to realize that they have agency, change is possible, and it's within their grasp. Is so many people come to me and they go, "There's nothing that can be done. I guess we have to get a divorce." And I'm like, that's
Right.
one choice, but it's just you recognize agency in that choice. Let's explore other options that you may have some agency in as well. And it's often quite eye-opening for them to realize that it's not an either or option. It's not a black and white choice.
No, one thing does not mitigate the other, and I love that I've learned that over the years to understand that it's a yes and both
Yes,
can
and
exist. Yeah. You
yes,
can you can feel like there's nothing left but getting a divorce, and there's another option. Both
yes,
can be true. I'm curious about, well, many things. I'm just fascinated with all of your stories. But I'm curious about the Enneagram. I want to talk a little bit about that,
yeah,
and really, what that all entails. So let's start there. Start there. Let me know about all of the different,
sure.
eh,
In a
how it
nutshell,
influences your work.
it is an ancient symbol that it's a pictograph of how change happens in the world. Now, through the ages, through the millennia, and specifically in the last 100 years, it has been used and it's used quite widely in the business world. It's used in psychiatry, psychology, um, because it really reflects very well how human beings perceive the world. But what it really amounts to, the way I like to talk about it is human beings don't love change. And so in this process of change, and there's these nine
Oh,
steps and how change happens, we sort of set up camp in one of them, right? So I happen to be a type five. Type five is an investigator. And part of decision making, part of change is learning what your choices are and investigating and making what's good and what's bad. But my personality, I get stuck there. I don't actually ever then make the choice and carry out the execution. That's been part of my path of growth. But all of us get stuck somewhere in this, and the Enneagram is really enlightening. I think for two reasons. The first is that it's not so much about your external actions or behaviors. It's really about the story that you tell yourself. So it's not like, oh, Todd behaves in these ways, he must be a five. It's how do I understand myself and what I'm supposed to do and my obligations are, or how I'm being treated, what I deserve. And that we all have that sort of narrative running in our heads all day long. And the Enneagram names those and says, if this is the narrative, if this is the story you tell yourself, then here are probably the patterns you fall into that serve you well and the ones that hold you back. I think the second
Okay.
great thing about the Enneagram is that it's not static. It has this arc to it that says, hey, when you're stressed out, when you're unhealthy, when you're not yet aware, these are the things that are going to plague you. And the path for growth looks like this. If you're a five, the path of growth looks like getting in touch with your feelings. It looks like learning about agency and realizing that making this experience beats learning from a book. And then there's this picture of where you can be when you are less stressed, when you're more centered, when you're more awake. And I use that with my clients because I help them in the beginning to say, listen, do you recognize this image of you? Do you recognize this version of you? And I talk about the high end of whatever their personality type might be, because invariably we've caught glimpses of it throughout our lives. That hope is the foundation, like we were talking about, for people to say, oh, maybe there's something here that's positive that we could lean into and strive for. So for me, the Enneagram, knowing so internally the ways that we think and talk to ourselves, and yet also offering a way forward and a vision that we can connect to because we see, hey, that's me. That's me. It may not be me all the time, or may not be me lately, but that is me. It really is a motivator and an empowering tool.
Mm. I love how it has the two things. It has awareness, which is a key portion of change, but then it's
Yeah.
also got guidebook action steps, ways that you can move
Yeah.
forward, kind of that two tone sort of thing. If I recall correctly, I think I was a two, and I think my
Ah,
husband was a one, if
okay.
if I recall correctly, but I can't remember.
My wife is also a
Um,
two. I know twos well.
yeah, yeah. Well, the caregivers, right?
That's right. The helper.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, strong caregiver right here. And yeah, and so I remember all those things, you when you're angry, you wing to a this, and when you're stressed, you go here and etc.
Right.
And I personally have always loved the idea of personality typing and helping to understand ourselves on a deeper level. But something that I agree the Enneagram has is the ability to not put you in a box.
Yeah.
You're not just,
Yeah. I like
the
to say
fun
you're
one
not your
or the
type.
this. Right.
You are not your type. It may be the your reflex. It may be your instinct. It may be your habit. But that's where the awareness comes in because when we are aware of our knee-jerk responses, we are not beholden to them. So
Hmm.
I like to say awareness is awareness is the first step on the road to change, but often it's the only step because as soon as you go, wait a minute, there it is again. There's me doing that thing that I do. That's the moment that you have permission and agency to make a different choice, that the
Yeah.
possibility is there. And as long as you remain unaware, you're bound to just keep repeating the patterns. So that's a big part of the work that I do with people is to just give them the awareness of themselves and a peek behind the curtain of their partner and an awareness of why they are the way they are. That it immediately generates empathy. It's beautiful to watch. I love it. It's my part of my favorite thing in the program is because when I go over your type with you and you go, wow, this is me. You really get it. And I go, now let me tell you about your partner. I have this buy-in from you. You see how the system works. And I share this business about how your partner is, how they think, how they feel, why they do what they do. And there's a melting. Every time there's this heart melting, and they go, oh. And empathy is born, and there's this space for us to do the work that we need to do.
Very cool. And I would agree, listening to that, I'm thinking, I remember learning about Brad and my husband and learning about, all the different ways that, he might get triggered or some of his tendencies and those sorts of things. And I remember having that heart melting moment of going, oh, okay, I get it.
Oh, okay. That thing about him
Yeah.
that I hate, I think I
Yeah.
could probably put up with it now. It's not maybe not as bad as I thought. Yeah.
Yeah, well, totally. And then like some kind of tips and tricks to, kind
Yep.
of not let him get to that pressure cooker spot and
That's
all
right.
those things.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's exactly it.
Absolutely. Well, that is so cool. Well, your journey has just been so winding. What do you
Yeah.
feel would be kind of a common theme that going through all of your experiences, including the house fire, has really drove home for you? Like, who is Todd at the end of the day when it comes to your kind of core message that
Hmm.
you have learned through all of your experiences?
Boy, that's tough to kind of wrap up neatly with a little bow, isn't it? That's a big question. I think we've probably touched on a number of the elements so far. I like to talk about falling up. I borrowed that phrase from my brother because but the one part of that I don't love is that it feels like it's happening to you, and so it doesn't embody that agency that we've talked about. So I often find myself talking about making lemonade, and I know again that's sort of trite, but there is a deep truth to it that when another thing that I like to tell people, or I should maybe just talk about myself, that's core to me is I tell myself that the things that are happening to me aren't personal. The universe isn't out to get me. It's not like let's pick on Todd today. How can we piss Todd off today? Like it happens, bad things happen, tricky things happen, but when I don't absorb them as being about me, then I can sort of stay on top of that agency piece and say, okay, how am I going to respond to this? Because I don't want to be in a victim mentality. I don't want to think, oh, this is happening to me, and then lo and behold, there's nothing I can do. So you asked, what is the core? And I think for me, the core is awareness and perspective and intentionality, making choices on purpose, and probably flexibility. Blessed are the flexible, for they shall not be bent out of shape. I don't know if you've ever heard that, but I always like that sort of extra beatitude that somebody came up with, and I love that because agility is actually the word that I use with my clients. It's about because there's a built-in sense of responding with agility. So stay in. I taught my kids early what ready position was. Doesn't matter if you're playing basketball or baseball or cooking. When you're in ready position, when you're on the balls of your feet and your hand and you're balanced, and that I sort of want to give people that gift and carry that forward myself, model it that I just want to be in ready position and not have too many preconceived notions about how it has to be. Because as soon as I start making choices about specific outcomes, is actually when I blind myself to outcomes that I can't think of or that haven't arrived yet. I want to be open to those too, because many of those in my life have been way better than the outcomes I thought I wanted or that I was gunning for.
Yeah. Absolutely. And thank you for that. I hear a lot of surrender in what you're saying. Like there's a lot of that ready position. There's a lot of surrender and surrender not in the context that a lot of people think. Surrender in some context, people might think, well, that means you're laying on the couch doing nothing. You're
Right.
just accepting the bad. No, it's not that. It's it's a readiness, it's an allowing of what this life is, without
Hmm.
digging your heels in.
Hmm.
And I have a
Sorry.
lot, pardon.
No, please.
I have a lot of cancer survivors who listen to this podcast,
Mm.
and because I myself am a cancer survivor, so my
Hmm.
background is in that, and turned counselor and those sorts of things because that was just something that my surrender became,
Right.
what's this new life I want to live. And so, we often talk about um, surrendering to the experience that you're in and allowing it to be a choice. And I talk so much about the same stuff, not falling into victim mentality and,
Hmm.
and pushing off this thing and labeling it as only bad. Instead, making a choice to take your experience and turn it into something where you fall upwards, really. And I've
Hmm.
never used that term before, but I really think it's beautiful. I talk about lemonade all the time. Um, so there's a lot of parallels here.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and I see someone smiling and joyous on the other side of the screen, and I feel, quite happy and joyous in my own life. And sometimes I wonder if it doesn't matter what our story is, if it's a fire and everyone telling us that we don't belong and a whole bunch of career changes, or if it's a cancer story. I think that
Hmm.
the true joy in life is surrendering to the experience, having that agility, being in the ready position, and not taking our stories and saying, this is bad. I've labeled it as bad, and therefore, you know, the
Hmm.
universe is trying to
Hmm.
piss me off today.
I love the distinction that Buddhism makes between resignation and acceptance. And I love how you talk about surrender. I think it's a beautiful term that sort of goes between those and says, listen, resignation is throwing yourself on the couch and saying, it's being Eeyore, right? Woe is me, and this is there's nothing I can do about it. But surrender or acceptance says, okay, here we are. And that's a big difference between my therapy and coaching. Therapy, there's a lot of backward looking. How did we get here? What are the causes? How do we understand it? And coaching
Mm-hmm.
really just sort of says, all right, we're going to accept all of the past as prelude. It's true, it happened, but now here we are. Where do we want to go from here? Rather than trying to even understand the past, maybe. And again, it's there's nothing wrong with that.
Mm-hmm.
But I do find for me that there's so much that's unnameable
Yeah.
that we can get mired in that process in a way that prevents our forward movement. So I tend to focus on our next steps and direction rather than uh,
Yeah,
self-pity, I
just
guess.
digging.
Yeah,
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. I think that digging in the past gives you awareness, which
sure.
we've talked about. When you have awareness, you can really begin to shift things. And so I think that there is a place for it. But I'm
Agree.
so much more of the mind of a coach, because that's how I started.
Mm,
Then, in terms of a counselor, I'm currently in school to become a counselor. And as I've been going through the program, I've noticed more and more, kind of how I think that there needs to be a merriment of the two. I think that
hmm
you can understand the Enneagram, you can understand the past, you can create that awareness in yourself.
Sure.
But that second half needs to be that choice, needs to be those decisions, needs to be those, action-oriented steps, those goal settings and those sorts of things.
hmm
Would you agree with that?
I do, and I like to say that we need to give the past as much attention as it needs in that it informs the present.
Right.
If we're going to understand where we are now, we do have to give due and time and attention to the past. But it's not an end in its own right. We
Hmm.
we give a past attention so that we can take some agency and some charge in the present to shape the future. Otherwise, we just tomorrow will look like yesterday, and that's for many people that is the way that it goes. But that's not it's not a life sentence. It doesn't have to be that way. It's not uh, a prescription. So awareness, you couldn't be more correct that awareness is born of the examination and the reflection and the doing a little digging around in the past, but for a reason, to an end, not in an end of itself.
Mm. Very well said. Now, if you were 30 years, or what did you say, 20 years ago? No, I think you said 30 years ago. And you're in this place where, the glass is half empty. You're just not feeling like life is yielding anything for you. What's something that you might tell that version of yourself to kind of speed up the timeline a little bit and have a little bit more clarity like you have now?
Oh, I happen to subscribe to the notion that when the student is ready, the teacher appears.
Mm.
And often I will share wisdom or guidance or invite people into something, and they're resistant. And that's okay. To me, that's not, again, I try not to take it personally. I just say,
Hmm.
okay, they're not ready for it. I think the 30 years ago, that young man that will become who I am today was probably not listened to a word that I have to say. So it's a great question, and I will answer it, but I just have to begin with, and I have
Well
teenagers
said.
that I wouldn't have been willing to listen to it. And one of the things that pains me the most as a parent, as a coach, is that human beings tend to learn best through suffering through making the mistakes themselves. I would love to data dump all the stuff I've learned in my life into my children's heads and just spare them the heartache that I had
Mm-hmm.
to go through. But so maybe the advice I would say to myself would be hang in there. Be open to learning from all that's coming your way. It's not going to all be happy, happy, joy, joy, but there is great potential wisdom, joy to be found in and through it. Um, that might be, that might be something I would have been willing to hear, because it wouldn't be you should live your life in this way. I don't want to tell people that. I want
Mm-hmm.
to give them choices, and that would hold true even if I were talking to myself from those years ago. I wouldn't want to try to cut off possibilities.
I think that the advice you're giving is very permissive. It's to say, you have permission to make all the mistakes, keep open for all of the beauty that life has to offer.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I think a lot of people, they have this idea, if I read this next book, if I, meet this next teacher, if I do these things,
The
I
magic
won't have to
bullet
feel pain
thinking.
anymore.
Yeah.
And and truly that's, I mean, not how life works at all. But also I think there's a learning that comes, like you say, through going through these experiences. So I think that's brilliant advice personally. And I think that the 30-year-old version of yourself might think to themselves, like, who's this weird guy, number one, but two, um,
Where did
I
his hair
love,
go?
yes, there you go. Um, but but two, this really graceful piece of advice to say, give yourself grace, allow yourself to be open.
Yeah.
With
Yeah.
time, you'll figure it out.
Yep.
Hmm.
Life is a lot longer than I thought it was going to be when I was a young man. The shadows that are cast from the choices that we made go a lot farther than I thought that they would. And the longer that I live, and I'm not old, I'm not young, but I realize to just take things in stride, because you don't know. You just don't know. Is this for good? Is this for bad? You've probably heard that Buddhist parable about the farmer and the horse, and bad
Yeah.
things happen, and he says maybe it's good, maybe it's bad, and then good things happen. He says maybe it's good and maybe it's bad, and that sort of openness and again agility. I'll respond to what today brings, and I trust in myself, and I trust in my support system, and I trust in the universe that I have what I need to handle what today brings. I'll worry about tomorrow tomorrow.
Hmm. Very well said. I love that. Good, bad, who knows? Did a podcast on that one, and I just love that one.
It's a beautiful story.
It is. It is. Okay. So, I mean, I guess some wrap-up questions that I might have are, how can people get in contact with you in terms of your relational coaching, your emotional
Hmm.
intelligence techniques, and the Enneagram? How might they
Sure.
work with you?
The best way is just to visit my website. My company is called Connect Fully. Now I spell it with a K because we live in a world where you get to spell things how you want now. So KONNECTFULLY, connectfully.com. Or just shoot me an email, todd@connectfully.com. That's the fastest and easiest way to get in touch with me. I'm on social media, Facebook, Instagram, but really reach out to me and let's be in conversation, because there's lots of possibilities, and I can, maybe point you in the right direction, or maybe we're a great fit. However that might work out would be a joy.
Fantastic. I will link all of that in the show notes so that if anybody is interested in working with you, there is no space bounding here. You can be in Portugal, I can be here in Canada and we can have this conversation. So, a really, really intelligent way to work with people, and enjoy the beauties of Portugal as well. So great work there. Okay,
Thank
well,
you.
it's just been an absolute pleasure to have you. I love your
It's been a
stories.
joy.
And most of all, I really love your perspective on life. I think it's so uplifting and and rare to hear someone explain all of these situations in such an articulate way. So great work there. And I
Thank
can't
you.
wait to share this with my friends and family.
It's been a joy, and I look forward to more of your excellent episodes too. I've had a chance to check a couple out as I knew this was coming up, and it's beautiful to hear the conversations that you have and the way that you really bring the best out of folks. I felt like you've done that for me today too, and I want to thank you for that.
My pleasure.